we have, I think, 4 terrific practitioners here, and I want to dig a little deeper into, what they do in their practice and how they go about doing it every day. When I put this theme together, just to put this sort of discussion in perspective, I've been 15 years now in practice, and I've always been curious about how the really good designers go about what they, how they sort of put their thoughts together and what happens within the practice, the sort of backstories within the practice, to set up what they do eventually and then sort of bring out fabulous outcomes. Of course, you see them, there's visibility, there's social media, and there's all of that, but that's sort of almost, it's sort of very visual, and it's very sort of outcome-based. But what you really want to know is how they think about or how they do the stuff they do in the office and what they've been doing over many years. And that's why I titled it Practiced Journeys, almost to kind of say that there are these routines, I imagine, that you go through within the practice and how you go about doing them across so many years to maintain the rigor and the stuff that you do at a very high standard. So it's on that note that I want to get things going, and I wanted to ask you, Iram. I want to understand how you actually think through a project right up front. Let's say something lands up on your table, there's a new project, there's a new inquiry. I'm not sure if you are now in a situation where you decide who you want to work with, but what thoughts do you go through right up front, and how do you sort of set the tone for a project in the beginning?
Thank you, Sujit. I think I have a very simple way of approaching it. I'm completely client. This note, I think for me, it's all about the client. We work in a segment which is primarily residential. And I think my practice is entirely driven by people. My approach to a project is based on my clients when I meet them. I like to spend a little time. That's my basic philosophy that I share right at the start, saying, I'd like to get to know you better. I'm very clear that I want to design a home that is theirs and not mine. So I believe, I agree with what Aamir said in his presentation, that I don't have a particular style. I want to be able to put myself in somebody else's shoes. I'm basically a storyteller, but I don't tell my own story. And that's my very, very, very first approach. Then, of course, the space comes into being. The space, every space talks to all of us. It says different things, but the main impetus for me is always my client.
Right. Yeah, so you're saying basically the client, you're looking for cues in the project upfront in your conversations with the client, basically.
My conversations, I look at how they're dressed. I look at when we meet, literally something as basic as what they order. It's a lifestyle journey, right? It's a lifestyle that you are sort of creating with another person or with a family. And it's very important to understand how they live. So every single nuance, every detail comes into play, and that's how you are triggered, or at least I'm triggered to create something.
That's interesting, Iram. I want to take that to Sanjyt. Is there a sort of, do you have a set of routines that you go through upfront when you are, have an encounter with a new design situation or a project? What do you do first? What is your sort of immediate reaction to, in a situation like that? How do you go about it in the beginning?
Well, it's not very different from what Iram said. I think all of us kind of follow a similar, we follow the similar sort of, direction.
Yeah.
It's a lot about interaction with the designer, the clients for sure. And, we need to learn the lifestyle, as Iram said. It's not just that, but also like, we do bring in our aesthetics a little bit. Obviously, it's a place they're going to live in. But at the same point of time, we also want to be excited about, what we are doing.
Right.
So it's a blend of both, and as she said, how the clients live, we discuss with them, how they function, when the gentleman comes back from work, does the family sit together, or how do they live on a daily basis?
Do you have clients come to you very specifically because they see you do a certain kind of work? And, is that sort of, does it make it easier that way because you already know what clients can expect from you? Or?
Yes, it is. But we also have clients coming to us and, they say, can you please do what so-and-so did.
Yeah.
So, you know, our answer is please go to them because that's not our aesthetics.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Shantanu, you want to have something to say on this? I mean, how do you go about this? How do you work at the? Yes, you have a very sort of, you know, there's something extremely strong about your aesthetic, as Iram just said. Does that kind of drive a certain kind of clientele to your office? And, you know, do you then decide who you want to work with? And if so, how do you then get going with them? What are your first conversations, for example?
So definitely while practicing in a particular manner where like I'm being very bold on use of colors and materiality and blending of styles and stuff like that. But definitely it becomes much easier because when client approaches me, they are expecting something out of me. Like if you are going to Shantanu, then definitely you have to be open to color or you like enjoying living with colors. So other than that, there are clients who had come that we like your aesthetics, but we want all whites. We want very muted tones, but we like your aesthetics. So we are dealing with all sort of clients, but definitely it is much easier because when clients approaches our studio, they are already convinced because they have experienced our work or they know that we follow a certain bold philosophy towards how we take the culture and context into the picture, or like how we like to narrate our client stories in our design narratives. So definitely it is much easier because clients are usually they come because they're looking for it. Like they know that this is the particular style that I'm looking for it. That's why they're coming to me. But there are 10% cases.
Right.
I have Bulgarian client also that I'm working with in Dubai. Her palette, her style, everything is different than the clients I'm dealing in India. But what she likes and because she understands design and she go into the core of design, so she also said that I also want my roots, my culture and my likings put together in a format of design. So I believe like it depends case to case, but usually my clients are always convinced when they approach me, when we are on table, they already stalk me, they know that what they are going to deal
what
with
they can
me for.
expect.
But there are clients, they say that, okay, we don't want to use bold colors. Like I cannot go for a red dining chair, or like, you know, they say like, no, we like everything, but you know, sometimes clients, they cannot accept that use of bold format of design that we use, lot of patterns or like lot of blend. So, but we are dealing with all that.
That's a good place to be, I think, if you're able to sort of command a certain kind of clientele and, you know, sort of, or you have control over that rather, you know.
No. So I'm really flexible that way. But like I am doing a new project where everything is very monochrome. But what I look for, like I look for stories from my clients. That's what define all my projects. Like according to me, unique, or like I can evolve them further based upon those stories, because I like to do different in each project. I don't want to repeat. So even if I'm developing, like I have to develop certain products, in fact, to carve that entire approach, the entire story into my design. I have to develop the whole format, or like it's just like I use the shell as an opportunity to basically display these stories through my products, through art. Like however, like no, you know, I'm narrating there.
I want to talk about that a little bit more. How you know, I know you use the word narrative a lot. I want to come to that next. Aamir, I was just looking at your presentation, and it almost feels like that, you know, I'm assuming this, you can correct me, is almost that I think you have the ability maybe to impress the client with very quick reactions, because I saw some back of the napkin sketches, and then, you know, some sort of, you know, there was one on on a receipt of some sort. Is that something you do when you are sitting with a client and you just sort of go ahead and say, look, this is what this space can become? You know, I think.
So basically, Hamida and I work very similarly and also very differently. I'm very erratic. I'm very spontaneous. Designs come to me very, very quick. I spend a lot of time sketching. a lot of my clients come to me because I'm spontaneous. I would possibly sit with pieces of paper, start sketching. I'm imagining, I make sure they are imagining what I'm imagining. So that's what works for me. And I think Sanjit's been seeing me for many, many years. And he's possibly seen me work also. So it's all through sketches. A lot of, I'm very interactive with the client. Very, very interactive. I'm not very strong with drawings. But Hamida is very, very, very particular about her drawings. She's very systematic. So from one office, there are two very different people who are working. So that's the way I like to work. I need my designs ASAP. It just has to come to you. The design has to just come to you. You could have possibly seen it while surfing through the internet. Something lasts in your mind. Maybe I would have seen someone's arches somewhere and it's still in my mind. And when there's a client in front of me, it translates into arches or a movie I've watched. So I'm very spontaneous.
Is it like you sort of maintain a library of ideas and then you sort of adapt it to any given project situation, or each project has its own kind of demands?
I was always like this.
Okay.
Right from when I started. And that's why some of the clients are so used to my method of working that they keep coming back to me again and again.
Yeah.
So they just like it that I just give them an idea then and there.
You can engage them right there, right? To say that,
I keep them engaged all through the design process. The idea is to keep them engaged.
Right.
So as soon as what happens in my project is, I mean, everybody has all kinds of clients, but sometimes clients, once you lose the engagement with the client, that's where the problem comes, and that's what happens to me. So with all my clients, I'm always engaging with design. I keep them engaged. Yeah.
Right. Okay. No, that's interesting, and I wanted to extend that into what I want to ask Sanjyt next is, so there's that sort of perennial debate within the fraternity, right? And generally as a critique or as a discussion between designers and, when you write about designers and so on, is do you really have to have a unique response to each design problem, or does what you do really have to fit into an overriding philosophy of the practice? And I wanted to ask you this specifically because I noticed that you said on your website that a space should reflect your style and be a curation of what you love. So it almost feels like, the stuff that you are really passionate about has to come through, and that's almost a precondition maybe in some way. Is that something that am I assuming that right? Or?
Yes, you're quite right there. I would say it's from both sides. Even the clients should love the space that they live in. So we love our design part of it, and the clients should love whatever the space they're going to live in. I mean, I'll just tell you a small sort of an example. We worked on this farmhouse in Chhatarpur in Delhi, and it's a weekend home. And the client said, his only brief was, it should look like my grandmother's house up in the hills. So I said, but we need a little bit of more direction to this. He said, all right, throw in a Swiss chalet. So we kind of blended it in together, and the space that we designed, the artwork that we sourced, a lot of accessories, like, we had these silk roses that were handmade by his grandmother. So, there was this emotional angle to that. We also brought in truckloads full of pine cones that were laid in concrete flooring from outside his grandmother's house. So, there is a story to the whole project, and when they go, the grandmother also, when she visits Delhi, they like to spend a lot of time there because a lot of things we use there were made by her or are from her house. And, it's something that they're going to cherish for a long, long time. So, there has to be a story to it. I mean, design also has to have a story, but, the space, it's an entire narrative.
Right, yeah. No, I think I was more curious to know whether it has to be really your story in a sense that it has to reflect, because I'm just sort of going ahead and, with my observations of your work on your website and on your Insta page and so on, it has a certain sort of quality, there's a lot of shimmering surfaces, there's a use of certain sort of dark tones, and are those things that you've worked on over the years and is something that you want to carry through as a style? Is that your narrative in some way, that there's a style that you're kind of building up, which is, so I come to you because I know what to get, it's an extension of the earlier question in some sense, but is that the narrative of the office in some way?
Yes, you're right there. I love the color black. So I like to do a lot of spaces that are black.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think it also comes from the fact that I've spent a lot of time in New York. I lived there for about 9 years, and all colors that you see are like black, navy, gray. That's all people wear. So I mean, 95% or 99% of my wardrobe is black. I like working at 3 a.m. You know, when it's pitch dark.
Yeah.
So I think it just kind of comes. It's an extension of who I am.
Yeah, yeah. And for you, Iram, it's the other extreme, right? You said that, you know, that you don't really believe in a style. You don't, it's not that for you. And I'm just looking at this project that you did recently. It's called the House of Memories. I imagine it's the client's memories in some sense, right? Or is it something else?
You're right. It is the client's memories. I think my style, I would like to restrict it possibly to myself. I think where I have slightly more rigid, Shantanu's already smiling, a slightly more rigid approach is to the kind of art that I love. I think, and it's very important to me, it's something that I love. I think it brings soul into spaces. I think it's really the, one of the most important things that we do. And that's the one space that I find slightly non-negotiable when it comes to the kind of art that I'd like to place. I've been very fortunate. I have incredible clients who've trusted me with their journey with art as well, and we've grown together, and you know, we've built great collections. But otherwise, I don't have a distinct style for a client. I'm very clear that it is their style. I think my job is to create a sense of aesthetic that is balanced, that is beautiful, but reflects them. I think that is, for me and our practice, that is what our job is. I love black as much as Sanjyt. I mean, I think looking at all of us, these wildly, other than Aamir, yeah. You know, this is something that you will see in a lot of people, but apart from Shantanu, of course, who makes a lot of fun of my obsession with the color black or white. But I think I would like to extend myself, and it becomes interesting, and it's a learning process. Like the House of Memories, my client loved the color pink, loved it. I didn't know what to do because you couldn't pay me to wear pink, right? But he wore pink regularly. He wanted a pink bedroom. I kind of faked it a little bit because I did give him a pink ceiling, which at a certain time during the day looks pink, mostly looks white otherwise. But I did, he loves color. My clients love color. I hope I used it, and I hope I used it well. But for me, my belief is that I have to use it well and aesthetically.
No, it's interesting. So what you're saying is that you sometimes design around the art in some way, right? I mean, is that something that you can, is that the right way to see it?
That's the dream. I mean, give me a great art collection and let me design around it. Yeah, that would be the dream project.
Yeah.
Along with some of Aamir's budgets, but yeah. But that would be a dream project, yeah.
Yeah. And Aamir, for you, I think you already spoke of it in the presentation. You don't really believe in a style as such, right? I mean, that's not really what you're chasing in some sense. But after so many years in practice, do you really feel that, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think he does have a style, but I'll let you finish the question.
I know he's very stylish, but that's not what I meant. I meant...
No, of course, that Uber, but yeah. I think because I stalk Aamir as well.
We all do.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah.
There is a distinct style. I mean, like you said, volumetric. There's lots of volume. It's clean. It's minimal. It has bold splashes. I'll let you talk about your work. Let me not gush any further.
Yeah, it's what I want to know, Aamir, is that do you think of it like that? Do you think that, you know, I mean, you've been in practice for a while now, and, you know, do you think that the practice now wants to convey some things? When you talk to a client, you want to say, these are the things we do, this is what we are about. Do you speak like that in general?
Times have changed, people have changed. If you don't keep updating, upgrading, it's not going to work. Architects with old school of thoughts had to be brilliant, and that's why we followed them. The guys who just stayed with the same format of design faded away, and that's what's happened. So by nature we are like that, you know. I mean, we like to change. I hang out a lot with the younger generation for a specific reason to understand how their mind works. It's very important because they will be your future clients. So you must understand it's not going to be their dads all the time. The new generation who was 15 a decade ago is 25, has taken over his father's business. He has new thoughts. He's traveled more. He knows what he wants. So you have to be constantly updating yourself. And that's very, very important. You can't keep telling the next generation to do what you feel is right. It's not going to work. So you have to move with the time. You have to be in the flair. You have to understand fashion. You have to understand so many other things to start designing with the time.
Yeah, I mean, there's something that I want to bring up later in the conversation is about, you know, trying to stay relevant, right? After many years in practice, you have to kind of ensure that the client keeps coming back to you, or a new set of clients keep coming back to you. And what you're saying is that it's important that you sort of maintain the relationship with the next generation as well. That's interesting that you make a conscious attempt to do that.
So 60% of our clientele are under the age of 30.
Ah.
So, I mean, Hamida and I, we go back home and we are like, you know, this is what she said and this is what he said, and we keep smiling, and we are actually very happy about the fact that we are catering to the next generation. They believe in us. So for us, that is absolutely the best thing ever.
Yeah, yeah. Shantanu, I wanted to ask you this as well. I mean, we didn't speak on this. You know, how do you go about? And this is again a little bit about process in the office. Do you think about, you know, unconventional collaborations in your projects? Do you kind of decide when you have something on the drawing board that these are the kind of people I would like to work with on the project? Or, you know, is there a sort of template for that in some way? Or each project has its own demands and you kind of decide as, you know, on the fly, or there's a kind of structured way you go about that? Is there something that you think about?
So, as I said, in my practice, I definitely look for stories, like what my client, like if they give me a certain story, that becomes a core of my concept, like, you know, how I derive my design further. And then I take those stories as an opportunity. Then I researched it further. Let's say, for example, if a client says that I'm a disciple of Srinath, like, you know, there is a, so then you have to go and study the whole, like, it becomes such a solid concept. The client has given you a route. Now that acts as such a wonderful genesis of the whole process is commendable. So now I see, like, I identify, like, there are certain furniture pieces or lighting installation or art curation that I look for that will depict that story. So that makes my work easier. Like, say, for example, I want to highlight the arrival experience in that manner, or I want to adapt, like, the entire space with certain nuances where you can, you know, take that whole concept, that whole story, carry it throughout the project. Because I don't like that disconnect. Like, if you're in a space, I don't like suddenly I enter into a room which is not at all related to what I've done around. I like the story to, you know, tie all together. So for me, like, definitely and all these stories, they are narrated through products, and you need to collaborate. You need to collaborate with brands. You need to collaborate with artisans. You need to collaborate with designers. You need to, let's say, like, I take a lot of my advices from Iram, like, whenever I discuss about certain thing where I'm stuck. Let's say, for example, if I'm stuck on art and I'm looking for a certain content, I ask her. That's also collaboration. So likewise, like, we have developed a whole carpet collection with the brands, you know, which they're helping me out in narrating a particular concept. So even like how I identify certain artifacts and pieces. So, like, you know, but you have to strike a balance, because we are doing it in a current time. Like, you have to make your design modern also, because I want to basically raise the bar that Indian design is beyond ethnicity. A lot of my clients, they come and they say that yes, your work is quite traditional, but to me it's not traditional. Yeah. To me it's modern, because no one is able to see through my eye, because even if you go into the European classical designs, till date, like lot of modern narratives are done on the backdrop of the classical architecture. And
Yeah.
when you see that style modern, why can't you see your own roots, your own tradition, your own culture, your own context very modern? So I'm on that mission where I want to make Indian design very modern. I want to raise the bar. I want to take it beyond ethnicity and call it luxury. I want to give it that edge, maybe through materiality, maybe through developing certain products that define that the definition is Indian, but yet they are done in a very modern language. Like they're detailing, they're edging, like materiality maybe. So I feel you need collaboration. Like you need to collaborate with multiple experts who can help you in developing, who are ready to experiment, who are ready to do prototyping for you. And we've been doing this for all our projects.
Right.
And
Right.
definitely then it has to fall into the context. For me, like, I don't agree with the fact that I want a New York style home in New Delhi. Like, until and unless I have a solid connect, or like, but still I would like to educate my client to respect the context, to respect the location, to respect your own culture, and integrate it with whatever
Yeah.
is your ambitions are. Like
Yeah.
maybe even if it is a New York style, why, like I am doing a concept where I'm developing my way of narrating Art Deco. I'm doing very Indian style Art Deco. I'm using a lot of Indian templates. I'm creating patterns. So that research is on. I'm coming up with a project in Mumbai, because I can relate Bombay with Art Deco, but I really want to do Art Deco in my way, where I define Art Deco's presence in
Yeah.
our country.
Right. No, it's interesting you spoke of, context there. It almost feels like, for interiors and then for architecture, I guess the way you would differentiate context is that if you were putting up a building, there's a kind of physical presence of context, right? It's sort of evident and it's around you, and you're building in a place, and it's about place making and so on. And when you're in doing interiors for a space, it almost feels like you have to bring in the context. It's almost another layer. In your case, it's about memories of the client and so on. I feel that that's drawing from a certain context. It's another definition for context, maybe. And you have to kind of, it becomes something else, the interiors, right? It's otherwise bare bones, neutral space, right? And, how do you have a thought on that?
For me, context is, I think, much more emotional. Maybe it's not as geographical. I don't define it geographically, because I think it's also, I guess, who you work with. We all work with similar clients, but we have clients who travel, or at least pre-pandemic, everyone traveled. And so what they bring to the table is not restricted to maybe just India or that particular geographical context. And again, you're right, it's not a building that is being defined. When you're immersive, it's a little more immersive when it's interiors, because you're experiencing it every single moment. Our attempt is always to look at the emotion that will be evoked. And that emotion is what you are deriving, or I'm deriving from my clients, their stories, their experiences. Their experiences have never been limited geographically. And for me, that's the way it works. It's all emotional.
Right.
Emotional design is what I would really relate to.
Yes, I want to bring up a very specific example, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here.
Sure.
I'm looking at this office that you've done recently, and it had sort of a kind of very strong geometrical motif. And can you just sort of talk us through how what you're saying about context and sort of extrapolating from the client is sort of then superimposed as a geometrical motif? How does that happen? I mean, how are you?
So again, that was like I said, depending from client to client. That space is for a client who runs a pharmaceutical company. The space that we had these beautiful long corridors, and the instinctive response to space was to create receding perspective, to try and create this whole vision, which is what was the first impetus. The second was, how do you contextualize it? What do you want to do? and say about the people who are going to inhabit this space. The arches came because what are the two most common things that a pharma company makes? They make capsules and they make pills, rounded forms. And therefore, that led to the arches. Yeah. The flooring pattern, it looks very simple, it's very graphic, and it is, but it's actually derived from a small part of their logo. So I like a little bit of the hidden detail. I don't think it has to be obvious. I think I'd like it to be a discovery. I think, you know, when you sort of have a quiet kind of detail that pops up at you and that you're not really expecting, it's not in your face, it lingers and it creates its own impact. So the context was, you know.
It almost feels like, but is it right to assume that you don't talk about this? Like when we're talking now, you're really sort of, I mean, these are almost like secrets in the project, right? I mean, these are not very literal translations. There's something sort of implied and abstract.
Yes.
And you don't see this on your blog. Is that something that you draw this up, or how you?
I draw up everything. So I'm like Hamida. I'm obsessed with drawing up details, and I think it helps me think better. It brings a lot of clarity. But for example, in this project itself, there's in the boardroom we developed a carpet. The carpet has actually scientific and mathematical formulas, but they're just a little off because I'm also very Indian in my head. You know, we've all been brought up saying, oh, God forbid, you know, if a book falls down, you instinctively reach out and touch it and you do this because Saraswati can't be messed with, right? So I didn't want to put the real formulas because people walk on it. But the idea was that what is behind a large pharmaceutical company? It's research, right? What do all of us do? Everybody here is talking about research. We're all eternal students. So I wanted to bring that into the space. But the formulas are just a little off.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What about you, Sanjyt? I mean, I wanted to kind of ask you this is, how do you kind of choreograph a project once, you know, it sort of comes through? Do you do a lot of drawing and illustrations and prototyping? Is there a kind of process that, like a sort of chain of, like a sequence of things that you do, and how important is maybe drawing and making stuff? And is there something that you want to say on that? What is the office method in that sense?
Well,
and what kind of collaborations do you encounter in that process, or how do you derive those, or how are you?
It varies from project to project. I mean, I guess it's very project-centric. And it kind of starts, I talked before, it starts from the brief from the client. And I'll try and explain it to you in a little sort of like based on one of our projects. It was a young couple from Dubai, and they have their second home in Delhi. So, my first question to her was like, you know, what's your design brief to me? She said, in this world of beige and brown interiors, I want color. You know, I want fiction, I want fantasy. And I caught on to these words. My next question to you was, are you okay with animated characters? She's like, I'm perfectly fine as long as it doesn't look like play school. And my third question to her was like, what's your favorite moment? And she's like, then her boyfriend, you know, proposed to her in Tiffany's in New York. So I kind of picked on the color from like the Tiffany blue, and, you know, talking of, you know, fiction and fantasy, you know, we collaborated with Scarlet Splendor. You know, they were the perfect brand for us. With the kind of, you know, the product.
It's very quirky, very interesting.
Very quirky. Then we got this giant giraffe from Marcantonio.
Yeah.
So, you know, the right kind of products in the right kind of place obviously doesn't look like a play school, but, you know, it has a very sort of, I would say, a quirky vibe.
Yeah. And what are your collaborations, though? Sorry to interrupt, but what kind of collaborations do you set up to make these objects? Because I think you also talk about anthropomorphism. And, you know, you talk about, you know, I noticed that running through a lot of your projects, you know, I mean, these sort of quirky moments, and, you know, how are you making those? I mean, is there kind of collaboration with different factories, or there are people, you got some sort of elves in the background making these?
I think a lot of it comes from frustration, not being able to find the right products. So we do a lot of these quirky objects ourselves. So, again, it's a collaboration for sure with artisans, but the sensibility is very ours.
All right. Yeah. Aamir, I wanted to ask you this as well. I mean, you spoke of this guy from Kerala who was, you know, using this coconut oil technique to plaster the surfaces. And do you really have now a team of dedicated set of people who are now working with you constantly on all your projects, or do you kind of decide that this project needs this sort of team and this guy needs maybe, you know, a very specific kind of, or this project needs a very specific kind of, a making process. So how do you kind of put that together? Is it project specific, or is it you already have people doing it for you?
So basically, we are a very boutique firm, and we have a team of 17 people. That's it. So we don't designate work to different people. Everybody works as a team. Initial sketches are given by me and Hamida, and then the team develops on it. And the team then decides which are the other external consultants they would like to work with. So that's how we leave it to them. We give them the freedom to do so. So they stay involved with the project. And yeah, so that's how we go about it.
Okay, okay. Sure.
But what about the artist who did those wire sculptures? The wire sculptures in the brewery?
The wire sculptures in the bar, the wire sculptures.
The wired sculptures were done by young artists.
That's the kind of thing that I was kind of pointing to, you know. I mean, it seems that that was very a crucial element of the space, right? And you made that decision to populate it with these guys, you know, these. So it feels like, you know, you are making that decision that this project needs this kind of abstract object to give the space a certain vibe and experience. And when you do that, what do you do then? You just sort of go to somebody that you know, and say that, look, make these things for me? Or is that part of, are you already in these collaborations and somebody's doing it for you? Or how does it work?
No, so these mesh sculptures were an afterthought. Once the structure was ready, once the space was ready, I wanted to add some color in the space. So I thought of these mesh sculptures. These mesh sculptures came, also it was inspired by, I don't know the name of an architect or a designer. It was a very widely watched Instagram post which had these wired mesh. I don't know what it was. I don't remember the designer's name. So selfishly, we forget who the designers normally are, who we get inspired from. We remember the product. So that's how it, and I was so sick of the pandemic, I wanted to create birds, freedom. But instead of that, I created these people climbing, jumping all over the place to add fun to the space, to create the volume, and to give my message that we are going to be free again.
Right. Yeah, it was a terrific moment, I think, in that project. Yeah, it was really nice. I wanted to ask you about that project. Very specific question, Shantanu. Is I noticed that, I don't know what the project's called. Is it called Melange? I think. Yeah. Yeah, and the boiserie panels, right? The wainscoting. How did you go about getting that done? Yeah, the boiserie panels. Yeah.
So basically, I wanted. So basically, we were developing this formal living space, and while doing this entire, I was refining the whole space. We thought like we'll carve this formal living like a space within the space. And so in 2020, we developed a collection with Jaipur rugs. Those were our graphical narratives. So basically, I wanted to, whatever memories I have when I visit the, let's say, our Indian architecture, monuments, or a particular moment, or any ceremony. So what I remember is that line, like, those edges, like that gets into my memory. So I just wanted to like take those lines. I don't want to go into the intricacy of the built structure or a particular moment, but what has imparted in my memory is what I unleashed through those graphics. Now we were looking for like multiple materials, that how I can translate these graphics into a design, like into a physical design. So one was carpet, because it is a very two-dimensional entity. And then we thought like, let's try and experiment with leather, because our client was fond of certain kind of boiseries, but I wanted to do particularly in some different material, these patterns, these graphical narratives. And then we did experiment on one particular panel, and the finishing, everything came out really well, and we thought like it is going to work. And then we got one we collaborated with an Italian leather expert who basically helps in getting, basically they cut the leather in a particular shape to achieve that particular form. So they do the reverse engineering, like they understand your form and then they send you all the templates, and then we use those templates, we got the leather cut, and then we crafted each and every piece. Like every piece is basically constitute the whole composition. So,
like a painstaking affair,
basically it
yeah.
all started with, after I developed these graphics, and then I look forward like how I can, use them in my furniture, how I can use them on these panels or carpets or any sort of surface application. We are in fact collaborating with another brand to develop couch. Basically, it is very difficult because in there we have to give the whole shape while retaining the whole graphical format. So again, we collaborated with someone who is doing the 3D mapping on the sculpted sofa, where we are going to achieve all these because I want to have all these pieces separately and then assembled together to constitute the whole graphic.
No, I think, for me, that's, since you spoke of this idea of, the tradition versus contemporary,
Yeah.
I think for me that's, it's a terrific example of that translation. I think, a real abstraction of,
Yeah.
a very traditional motif. It's got a certain method, it's a painstaking process, it appears, very sort of crafted attempt. And then it's overlaid in a fairly neutral, in a modern setting. I think it's a terrific moment, I think, very nice. Just sort of deviating from this a little bit, or maybe it's an extension of what we are saying, it appears that, what I'm gathering is that all of you have, as much as you don't talk about it or you don't write about it, or it's not really depicted, anywhere as such, except maybe in these conversations that we have informally, is that, I think there are a number of things that happen within the office, right, for you, I mean, as a, in terms of developing the craft, and, Aamir, for you, in terms of your conversations and, your ability to take on so many projects at a time, and, and Iram, for you, the way you kind of, figure out your clients, I think, in some sense, right? I mean, you really take the effort to put in, time and, understand that. And I'm just summing up what you were saying in some sense, Sanjyt, is you are able to convince your client that this is what you're able to offer, and then overlay that in your projects in some sense while taking into account their sensibilities as well. But I want to extend what Aamir was saying that time about this idea of staying relevant, right? It's something that maybe bothers all of us, right? And, I've been in practice for a while. It's something that consumes me sometimes, is what do you do? And especially in the last 20 months or so, I guess we've all had time to think about it. It was an absolute void in that sense, right? And what are you doing now, Iram? Are you doing something differently now as you were maybe doing, let's say, how long have you been in practice, Iram? Like 20 years, I think,
20
right?
years.
Yeah. So, you were doing some things then in a certain way, and you've kind of grown through those years, and you're doing some things in a different way now. Are you looking to do something new maybe in the next few years? Is there something that you're attempting? Yeah.
Constantly. I mean, I think I'm an eternal student. I think what's also been really amazing throughout, not just the pandemic, but actually maybe the last 4 years, as a fraternity, we've come together. We talk to each other. There are friends sitting everywhere here. And for me, it's been a joy, it's been a blessing. Whatever you do, in my head, we live in our little echo chamber somewhere, right? Because you're in your own studio, you want to do something different, you want to think differently, but sometimes you're stuck. I talk to Shobhan, I talk to Shantanu, I call Ekta, I call Rajiv, I call Vivek, Amrita. I mean, I can name a number of fantastic designers who, through those conversations, will help me think of something totally different. I love that exchange that we have, and I think that part of the collaborative fraternity that we are part of today is something that is benefiting my practice in a big way. So for me, that's a big thing. Last year, in the middle of the pandemic, I decided to do something I had never done before. someone asked me to be an art director for a new furniture brand. Never done that. Decided to jump into it with both feet. So now I do that as well. And again, it's been learning. You know, I work with furniture designers who are based in Italy, getting into details, thinking from a different context, thinking from a completely different perspective, then sort of confining yourself to certain parameters that you have to work within in a different module. I think for me, it's been really great.
So you are kind of stepping out from the sort of regular shoes of being in practice, and you're attempting these other things that you think will maybe feed the practice back in some sense. Is that?
Yes.
Is that what yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think everything, whatever feeds you, you feed back into your practice.
Into your practice.
Yeah.
No, that's very nicely said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Aamir, what about you? Are you doing some things now that may be away from practice? I know you're really busy and you do lots of work, but I know you're smiling, but you know, I'm just thinking, apart from the personal passions, in terms of maybe linked to practice in some way, are there some things that you're now doing after so many years, and you think that's really helping practice in some way?
I spend a lot of time with young artists. I get intrigued by their thought process. More than art, like painting, I am very intrigued by sculptures. As you can see, a lot of our work now depicts those in
Yes,
one way or the
I
other.
noticed that, yeah.
So I spend a lot of time with two young artists, Nikhil and Chandni from Hyderabad. They are in my office practically every day. And I discuss a lot of things, with them. They inspire me and I inspire them. They have a fabulous studio where I like spending time. It could be making anything out of wire mesh, metal, cotton steel, wicker, various things. So I'm enjoying the process of spending time with young artists. And it's helping me bring out interesting things in our work.
Yeah. Is that something that you also talk about with your clients, saying that now you are able to, you're doing these things as well, and I mean, it's not only about space making and interior design solutions or architecture, you're also now maybe moving towards offering a new craft?
Yes, it's something that they get very interested in during the end of the project, because they are actually waiting for what I would possibly do next. So this has really helped me in my design process, my thought process. So when I see a space, I know I'm going to get the two young artists in later, or I might get Priyanka from the Wicker Story, or I might get another youngster. And
Sure.
I love the way they work, their thought process.
Yeah.
It just complements my work.
Yeah. And Shantanu, what about you? I mean, have you, just looking at the journey of your practice, you think that some things have really
Yes.
changed significantly for you? And
So what, literally like I moved into my new residence in 2017, and since then I was setting up in Dubai also. So I was quite traveling a lot. I've taken projects all over the country as well. So I was I never enjoyed my space. And so what I realized while living in my own space, I started focusing on developing designs that are lifestyle based. So I started studying how a vanity should work, what are the utilities a vanity should have, how I can improvise the way I organize a wardrobe. So we did certain collaboration where we developed a better way to organize and have certain facility for your wardrobe. And say even I got clients during this pandemic. They said that we want a dedicated bar meant for coffee. So did research on that. So now I suddenly I shifted my focus on, I look for those lifestyle elements that my clients need. There are clients who are passionate towards they want a tea bar. She has almost hundreds of teas from all over the world. So I love changing my focus from just design to focus on lifestyle, and then how I can
it informs your practice in some sense.
yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
worked with Trunks company. We developed a coffee unit, and how we sourced the crockery from another country, and the process was very different, the way they used to brew the coffee, and then they wanted a particular machine that we got from another country. So like, and then getting all those things, and then commissioned Jaipur Trunks to design a unit that can encapsulate all these utilities made to measure and like, you know, like do it in finesse. So,
Yeah.
so I love doing, I love researching on lifestyle. And I feel like this is slowly like I look forward to give these spots,
Yes.
like, you know, in my project where, you know, there are certain lifestyle elements that
Right.
are usable, but yet they are the statement pieces. Like we also work, I'm also working on a lot of collectible designs. I'm designing a jewelry piece.
Sure.
So I also did research on Indian royals. Like I read about a lot of Parisian brands, their books, and the history of luxury in India. Like how royals, how they were so sensitive towards their demands and needs, and how they commissioned these brands to make certain objects for them, like hundreds of years back, from Louis Vuitton doing a particular picnic trunk for them, to like the Queen of Baroda ordering a Minotaur for her lipstick cases.
Yeah.
So like there are so many bespoke narrative. Like our country is so rich. Like we had such a good, we had such a rich luxury attached to our culture. Like our royals used to have it. So that really shifted my base from like not just to design, but from design to lifestyle. Like how I can give that, how I can focus on lifestyle and create a design object for that particular lifestyle element, or like for that particular function or usage.
Sure. So it seems like there are several parallel projects then, I think, right? I mean, that you're currently involved in. Yeah. And Sanjyt, how about you? Do you think about this a lot as well? I mean, you know, what are you doing currently that you think is something that you haven't attempted before and is now is sort of on your table, you're excited about it, and it's something that's going to redefine maybe the practice in some way, or tweak it, or the way you think in some ways? And
So, I mean, it kind of, we've started a new vertical where we design objects now. So, because I feel like a space has to, I mean, I kind of look at it as a cocktail. It has to have the perfect mix of ingredients. So sometimes we don't find things, so we started creating those. And suddenly it's just become a new vertical for us. Like, you know, like we're doing rugs, you know, and it's not just because, you know, a lot of our day goes into meeting clients or site visits or dealing with contractors. So it's not as, you know, fancy or fun as it seems, like we all know that. So, you know, spending probably 2 hours with a craftsman or a weaver or a millwork factory, it just takes the mind off, you know, the regular kind of mess or whatever, you know, we go through the day.
yeah.
So, you know, I mean, it also keeps you excited.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, just
absolutely.
developing new things and...
Yeah, and some of these things have come through in the past 20 months, you think?
Yes.
Do you think
a lot of it has to do with the lockdown.
Yeah, I think
but
so,
we're
right?
continuing it as a practice now, you know.
Yeah, I think